Oh, wait. Shh. Yeah, yeah, pick it up if I do.
I'm Kimberly Martin from Carson Law Firm.
I'm sorry. Could you say that again?
Sure. My first name is Kimberly. My last name is Martin.
Could you spell that, please?
Sure. First name Kimberly. Last name Martin.
And you are?
I'm the attorney representing the applicant, Liz Lucas.
Just as a point of clarification, are you associated with Chris Nussbaum?
Yes, I am. So I work with Kristen's foundation this week and could not attend.
Okay.
And Steve, is this the audio picking up?
It is here.
Oh, there. I just don't want to. I think it'll be okay. I just don't want to jostle the audio for anyone who's listening. So we brought some visual aids. We weren't sure if the presentation screens were going to work today, but there's visual aids to walk through the application. So I'm going to, perhaps you have copies. I'm going to show them to you. And you can let me know if you have a copy.
They don't have that one. They have the previous one.
Previous.
We were sent another package from Mr. Nussbaum from Chris. That was previous to that one. He sent that one later.
You have the one that he sent previous to yesterday?
Yeah.
Okay.
I did.
It looks like this though.
No.
No.
He said something like that. So they haven't seen that.
They have not seen this copy.
They have not.
Okay. Gotcha.
We have seen something that the first page looks something like this.
No, that's some of the other notes on there.
Okay. Never did have that.
All right.
You're welcome to hand that out.
Okay, that's what I'd like to do. So this is not the application. This is just a visual presentation that goes over the application. You'll see there's some documents in there from the application. They're kind of blown up for ease of reference. And like I said, this is just because we weren't sure if we're going to have screen sharing. Oftentimes, we put up a PowerPoint and do that. Just since it wasn't necessarily going to work today. Everyone has a copy? All right. Wanted to do that so that you could see what I'm talking about. So like I said, I'm Kimberly Merton. I'm an attorney from Carson Law Firm, which is in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I know you guys met Chris Nussbaum a couple months ago. And you'll be shocked that Chris Nussbaum is not here today. But you got me for a little bit. Hope that's okay. I think I'm a pretty good substitute stand-in. And so we know you had a little bit of discussion about this last time before the application was withdrawn. Lou Lucas has resubmitted the application. We thought we'd clarify some things, go over some questions that came up, really make sure that the ask that's being made is fully understood. So I wanted to take just 1 minute, tell you a little bit about Lou, who he is, because he's the applicant. He has been boating on Lake Maxinkuckee for like 25 years. Loves the lake. Enjoys spending time on it. He's been looking for a property on the lake for a while because he'd really like to continue to do that. His son is planning on going to the academy this next year. So they thought now's a really good time to kind of make a home base here. So that's really the background to this application. And the idea being buy a property, have some access to the lake, and hopefully build what we consider a very tasteful residence on the property. Now there's a problem with this, and that's why we're here today, and hence the request for variance from the development standards in terms of the setback. So I'd like to kind of walk through the visual presentation that's in front of you. This is really, like I said, a visual tour of the application and the supporting memo, and some highlighting important things. So first and foremost, on your page, you'll see some pagination down on the right-hand corner, which is on top of an aerial photo. It's a little hard to see, but page 3 is really where we start out. And this is just an aerial of the property in question. And I think the first thing that you'll notice, of course, is that it's an odd shape, sometimes called a dog leg shape, a little kind of narrow access portion that goes up to the lake, and then a more substantial piece at the bottom. But it goes as it goes up. So this is what we have. It's about 0.28 acres. It's in the L1 zoning district, the Lake District. And so that's going to become relevant, as you may remember from last time. So another thing that's relevant is, and this is on page 4, this is a blow up of the boundary survey from 2006. Now I know that there is a history with this property, how this parcel got created, how it got split up. We would posit today that the history of the parcel and its shape is not legally relevant for the application that's here. It matters because this is why we have this weird shaped parcel. But at the end of the day, Lucas didn't create the shape of the parcel. It was created by other people doing other things with the land. And in some respect, it's just a function of an organic development around a natural and beautiful lake. So this is what we have, at least since 2006, we've got a dog leg shaped parcel, very strange shape to it. And then there's a little bit of a change that happened back in 2021. This is page 5. Again, this is a blow up from another survey. It's actually a replat that was submitted. And so what happens in 2021 is that the narrow lake access portion gets sort of split up. And that's to resolve some interest in the properties, provide some lake access. But the change that happens in 2021 is just about that narrow strip, the lake access piece. A little piece comes off, a little piece stays with the property. But importantly, the kind of big part of the property, that top part of the dog's leg, if you will, that was not affected in 2021 as part of the replat. And so I bring that up because I think it's important to talk about later on. Again, none of this happens because of anything that Lucas did. It's other people trying to make sense of the land, trying to deal with some interests that are there. And I know many of you were familiar with this history, but I wanted to go over it again first. And so then if you'll flip to page 7, this is kind of the key to the request that's being made. This is an artistic rendering of the house that Lou Lucas would like to build on this property, but he needs a variance to be able to do that. It's just an artistic rendering, but it's pretty accurate to the plan that Lou actually has. It's about 3,200 square feet. It would have a footprint of about 2,200 square feet, give or take. Of course, adjustments have to be made before a house is actually built. But this is kind of the idea. You can see it's got a nice, what we're going to call a 2-car garage this time, because I think that's the colloquial way to actually describe that garage. When you fit 2 cars side by side, regardless of how deep you pack them, it's a 2-car garage. I know that came up last time. So that's basically what Lou would like to build on the property. If you flip to page 8, this is a drone photo. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about what this photo is. So the surveyor went out and marked on the ground with survey stakes the footprint of what's currently planned for a house out there. And then they spray painted orange paint so you can kind of see the footprint of the house they'd like to build out there. And then they took a drone up, took a photo of it. And this photo is really relevant, not because, you know, it's not just about building a house on the property. It's about seeing how does a house sit on this particular parcel? And that is really important for the question that we're here for today. And if you look, I want to orient you correctly to this photo so that you understand what perspective it comes from. And this is actually with your back to the lake, looking south towards the property. And so north is behind your head, and you'll be looking towards the property that way. So if you look at the survey exhibits, you actually have to turn the survey 180 degrees upside down to have the same orientation. Don't want you to get lost on that. And you can see there's kind of a car down in the bottom at a person for scale. And you can see that this house would actually sit pretty nicely in this parcel. It's not dwarfing the parcel. It's not dwarfing the things around it. It would have a very nice footprint on the parcel. So we want to keep going because we know there's a lot to get through here tonight. We're going to get into the problem. This is page 9. So the reason we're here asking for a variance from the development standards, specifically the setbacks, is because, so under your building commissioner's interpretation of the zoning ordinance, and there's a lot to get through there, there is, the setbacks would be 25 feet from both of the streets. So Northside Drive and South Shore Drive. And then also 37.5 feet from what is really the western parcel boundary, but it's the parcel boundary between it and the house over Eric Burns' property. And so that leaves you with about 637 square feet of buildable area. And if you'll just look at that image for a second, not only is that a small space to build in, that has a very odd shape. And this is because of the shape that the parcel is currently in, and because of how these setbacks are being applied into the ordinance to this odd shaped parcel. This is an odd parcel. I know you've heard it before. It's odd in shape. It's odd in history. It sits between 2 roads, which is odd. And it's just one of those cases where it doesn't really cleanly apply to the setbacks that are contemplated under the zoning ordinance. And this is really the heart of the request for the variance. We think this is exactly the kind of case where a variance is appropriate. An odd-shaped parcel, a perhaps not predicted application of the zoning ordinance to a parcel like this, and oddly situated. This is what variances are for. And so if you'll flip to page 10, this is a annotated version of an exhibit to the application. And this is highlighting the setbacks that are actually being requested. You know, there was a bit of a question about this last time. We want to make sure that that question is fully answered. And you can see what's being asked for is a 10-foot setback from your street adjacent lot lines. And there's going to be several of them here because you've got a little bit of an odd arrowhead shaped dogleg parcel. And then 15 feet from the property line between this parcel and then Eric Burns' parcel. So that would be the western property line. And you can see there's a superimposed house, proposed house kind of in the center. This is not saying this is the only footprint a house would ever have. They're asking for these setbacks because we would like to be able to build up to that 15-foot setback. And you can see how that's going to lay on the ground. And to have a little bit of flexibility to build that house. And that's going to, that's just going to be, you know, a feasible thing. All right, now, moving on, because we have a lot to get into. Page 11 is the legal standard I'm sure you all are familiar with for a variance request. There's 3 things for the BZA to consider for a variance from a development standard. First is that the approval will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community. And I will emphasize that it's not injurious. Second is that the use and value of the area adjacent to the property that's included in the variance will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. And 3, this is the one a lot of discussion centers around, that the strict application of the terms of the zoning ordinance will result in practical difficulties in the use of the property. I will emphasize the courts are clear, it is not a practical impossibility standard, it's a practical difficulty standard. We think that's exactly what's being presented here with this property. And so we walk first into that first prong on page 12. Like I said, this is very much a visual tour of the argument that's being made. And that's really looking at the impact on the safety and general welfare of the community. If you grant a variance so they can build this house, what's the impact on the general welfare and safety of the community? We're aware there have been some concerns about this particular parcel. It's at the end of Southside Drive. There's reports of some congestion, vehicles, people sort of congregating at the end here. And part of the problem, we believe, is because it's a vacant lot. No one's on it. No one's monitoring it. There's a lot of questions about what's the appropriate uses, what's going on here. And we would argue that the solution is actually to have someone develop the lot, have a house on it, be able to monitor the uses and try to facilitate appropriate uses of the property. Right now, as a vacant lot, it's just not happening. People might be tempted to just sort of go right across to their lake access and back, which is also enticement to park more cars down there to go and do that. And we think that the solution here is develop it. Have someone who cares, have a house there, have interactions with the neighbors, and help really facilitate appropriate uses. I would also say, you know, there's been a comment about would building a house on this lot increase traffic and congestion and things. As you saw, no, the plan is to have a garage, a driveway, park the cars on it appropriately, so they wouldn't be contributing to that congestion. They'd be there to help monitor it. The second factor to consider is whether what the impact is on the use and values of the adjacent area. So this is page 13 of your visual. And so these visuals, you guys might recognize these houses. Some of the people in the room will recognize these houses. These are some of the houses surrounding the property in question. They're nice houses. They do vary in size somewhat. There's some very big houses out there. There's also some very moderately sized houses out there. But we're going to talk about those sizes here in a minute. And you can see they're all tasteful houses, residences, people living on them. And we think that putting another residence here is appropriate and would actually help the values in the community. And certainly more so than a vacant lot where people have questions about how it should be used. That might be causing some congestion issues. So moving right along, I want to talk about the setbacks specifically that are being requested. Because like I said, this is an odd parcel. It doesn't really fit squarely in the zoning ordinance. And one thing I'll show you, this is from your zoning ordinance. This is the development standards for this district, Melon Lake District. And many of you who've been through the zoning ordinance and seen this before, you always get these little illustrations of this is the ideal parcel, right? They're always rectangular, square looking, nice to look at. This is the ideal situation. And a lot of times zoning ordinances are developed for the ideal situation. But then you get an odd-shaped parcel. And how do you apply that zoning ordinance? You end up with some strange things happening, which we'll talk about in a second. But that's why it's important to look at each setback individually and see what's actually being requested in terms of what's going on in the neighborhood. So page 14, we're talking about the street adjacent setbacks. Again, this parcel is between two streets. So it's got two different sides and actually multiple lot lines that are adjacent to a street. So that's what those red arrows are pointing to orient us there. And the request here, of course, is to go back from a 25-foot street adjacent, that's how it's been interpreted, that 25 feet, down to 10 feet. And if you actually look around the neighborhood, this is what's on page 15, you'll see that there are several houses that are actually built pretty close to the street, arguably not 25 feet off of the street. So the request to reduce those setbacks down to 10 feet, we think is actually consistent with the rest of the neighborhood when you look around. And moving on, page 16, talk about the western lot line between this property and Burns property. You can see it's really, in some regards, a side yard. And we're not going to get into whether that's how it should be interpreted. I think that that's not what we want to talk about today. We just want to look at that lot line and say, okay, I see. It's between it and another house. So what would it look like if we reduce that setback? Well, it might look something like page 17, where you see all the other houses. They have a very minimal setback between houses. And this is pretty typical for other, houses developing around a lake, is that the houses get kind of close together. You'll see in this district, actually in your zoning ordinance, the side yard setback is 10 feet, which you may be seeing in some of these houses. The odd thing about applying the zoning ordinance to this weirdly shaped parcel is that this western lot line, which really is between potential building site and another house, which functions kind of like a side yard setback, would actually be 37.5 feet under the way it's been interpreted. This is how it's weird to apply a zoning ordinance that's set up for nice rectangular lots to dogleg shaped lots. And so we think, again, that's why a variance is very appropriate under these circumstances. So moving on, page 18, this is we're going to call it southeastern lot line of the property. And in this case, it's actually only adjacent to what I call a lake access strip of land. You can see it's a pretty narrow, it's providing somebody else access to the lake, to the neighbor. It is so narrow that reducing that setback is not going to negatively impact that person's for access. We all know it, we can see it. And so reducing that back from 25 feet to 10 feet is not going to have an impact on that neighbor. So we move on to the third element for you to consider today. And that's the practical difficulty question. Practical difficulty is at the heart of a variance request. And in Indiana, we consider three factors. So factor heavy discussion here. I'm sure you've heard them before, but we think that they're really relevant to this property. So one, is there significant economic injury to the applicant if the ordinance is strictly enforced? Two, whether the injury that's complained of is self-created, and this is important, is created by the applicant themselves. Did they create the situation? And then three, are there feasible alternatives that we'll kind of walk through? So the significant economic injury, page 20 is a narrative explanation. You saw this in the application. Really, here's the problem. Under those default setbacks, you're ending up with 637 square feet of buildable area in a very odd shape. And that means a house, if you can build a house at all that's consistent with the development standards, and that's a different question, is oddly shaped and undersized. In page 21, this is information that's excerpted from the application. This aerial with the highlighted parcels is just basically the general area. We pulled all of these parcels, looked at the property record cards and said, what is their finished space? And it turns out on average in this area, the average house has 3,704 square feet of finished space. Like I said, there's big houses out there, there's average size houses out there, but 3,704 square feet is your average size. So the houses that are smaller than that are not going to fit the market. And that is going to have a negative effect on the value of the property. That is a significant economic injury to the applicant. Not being able to build a house commensurate with the housing market that's out there. And this is what you're seeing on page 22, that buildable area of 637 square feet under the applicable default setbacks. It's not going to be proportionate to the size and general aesthetics of the surrounding community. This is the injury that's sustained by Lucas without a variance. And the second factor we have to deal with, two-part. Is this injury self-imposed? Are there feasible alternatives? It's important to consider, particularly in this case, your zoning ordinance has language similar to Madison County, and the Court of Appeals has said that we do have to look at those other factors. We can't stop at economic injury. So question, is this injury self-created? Lou Lucas is the applicant here. And so I would ask you to look at Lou Lucas because that's what the law asks you to do. Did he create this injury? And so, like we talked about at the beginning, the shape of this parcel has existed for, almost 20 years, at least, possibly longer than that. And sure, there was some, like access shaved off. Again, Lou Lucas didn't do that either. And that didn't happen to the building lot, didn't affect the building lot in any way. It's other actions that have affected the parcel, creating what we see there. And so we would argue Lou Lucas did not create this injury. This is just how the parcel sits on the property. It has a complicated history. The other thing that's important, you'll see on page 27, is that the courts say that if you purchase a property, knowing it's a weird shape and knowing how likely the zoning ordinance would apply, that is not a self-created injury. Just knowing that you're going to have trouble developing under the zoning ordinance standards, that does not constitute a self-created injury. And so we argue in this case, Lou Lucas did not create the situation. And even if he bought a parcel and said, you know what, I see it's an odd shape. And yes, I know I'm going to have trouble developing this property with the default setbacks. But the law has a mechanism in place for dealing with that. That's what we're here for. It's a variance. And so we get to the third factor for this part, which is whether there's a feasible alternative. And like I said, it's important to keep in mind that this particular prong of the test is talking about practical difficulty, not practical impossibility. The law requires difficulty, not impossibility. We're very clear about that. And so that's what we see here. 637 square feet of buildable area is really small, a very odd shape. I would also point out that under your zoning ordinance, the minimum dwelling size in this district is 1,600 square feet. The maximum structure height is 35 feet. If you do the math on that, you need like 2.5 floors of your buildable 637 square feet to try to get up to 1,600 square feet on a very odd shape. And so this creates a practical difficulty. You strictly apply those setbacks to this property, you either end up with a very odd building that I'm not even sure could be built to fit the minimum square footage. Or maybe you can put a mobile home on this lot. I don't know. That's not what we're talking about today. Obviously, that wouldn't be consistent with the general aesthetics of the surrounding community. We'd like to put a really nice, pleasing house on the lot. But this is the problem. It's just not possible to build. Shouldn't say impossible. It is incredibly difficult to put something on this property that would even meet those minimum standards, and it would certainly not be consistent with the general aesthetics of the surrounding community. It might be kind of ugly, I'll say that. And so our last page is just page 30. Again, these are images you've seen before. This is the heart of the request. Lou Lucas would like to put a nice, tasteful residence on the property. Something that might look like the footprint you see in that drone footage. We think it doesn't dwarf the property at all. So you could add value, certainly add taxable value to the parcel. Would be a benefit to the community. Have somebody living there who cares, who can enforce appropriate uses of the property and deal with some of those congestion issues. And you may think this is exactly why the variance procedure exists. And this is a very appropriate case for the variance to be granted. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, think as far as the attorney might want to address this first for question.
You want me to ask questions?
If you have any questions, whatever toward this.
I have no idea the way the board's leaning it, so I prefer the board ask some questions and I'll follow up.
All right, I'll start.
Okay.
You allude to the fact that it's 637 square foot is all that can be built. And then you say that the average size house is 3,700 square foot.
Approximately, yes.
I think you're comparing apples to oranges to the extent that those 3,700 square foot houses are multiple levels in and of themselves. 2, 3, maybe 4 levels high, depending on the slope of the land, whether it's got a walkout basement. And certainly 3 stories could be built and still remain under a 35-foot height setback. So to say you're limited to 637 feet, I think it's a bit of a fallacy when you go to compare it to other houses that are also multiple levels.
So I think it's important to distinguish the 637 square feet is what's left of buildable space. And you're right, it's not impossible to build up to the minimum 1,600 square feet on that little strange arrowhead shaped piece. It's just that it creates a house that's just not generally consistent with the aesthetic around the area. And so, like I said, that's why it's really important to focus on it's a practical difficulty or practical impossibility. The courts say practical difficulty is the standard. And you could probably put something on there that might get you to the standards, but that's not the standard that's there. Very odd shaped, very hard to do, and that's not the standard.
I have a second question. How does this plan that's presented today differ from the plan that was presented 2 months ago?
In terms of the application for the setback request?
No, the building plan, not the request for setback.
Yeah, so this is an important point. We're not asking for approval of any particular building plan. This is for setbacks. And so this is what can you build inside of those setbacks. What you're seeing on some of the images is an approximation of what the property owner, well, he's not the property owner yet, he's under contract. What he'd like to build, we would really like to build, and has plans to do so if he can get the approvals. I don't know, there may be changes in, what's the building plan because it's not set in stone. Obviously, we need permissions to build this house in order to do it. But what's being asked today is for those setbacks. I don't know if there's changes in setbacks that are being requested from last time.
That was not my question. My question was the building plan that we were presented, has that changed from when it was first presented us to what you presented us, the images of today?
Yeah, I'm not sure how to answer that question. I think in part because I'm not sure if you were presented an actual building plan. We're certainly not asking for approval.
Yes, we were. And the images that we were shown are exactly the same images or appear to be the same images.
Okay, then I would say that it is generally the same. Lewis had the same idea for the property.
Okay. And you do not have any concrete plans yet?
There's certainly been drawings drawn up, yes, but we can't create, construct because we don't have the approvals yet.
And my last question is, and you alluded to it a moment ago, this property has not been purchased. The status of the ownership of the property is not changed from when we were first presented with this.
Yeah, I think that's right as a legal matter. They're under contract, so he has an interest in it, but I don't think title has passed.
Okay.
Yes.
We were told that acquisition of the property was contingent upon getting a variance.
Great, and that would make sense.
That has not changed.
No, not to my knowledge.
I have no further questions.
Okay. I just want to bring up, you stated as far as the hardship or the difficulty as far as was not created. it was pre-created, I guess is what you want to say. But with this lot being the way it is now, we can't look at a variance because what was created prior to that. In other words, this lot stands as far as a legal lot. I mean, it has boundaries where they are right now. But prior to ownership, I mean, we might argue as far as legally, would you say that's creating a hardship? They're not. But by looking at the problems that would come through, would need a variance that would be over what the ordinance would require. And my thought, this lot was already unbuildable, which you showed that was 637 square feet of buildable property. That hardship was already there, non-created, but it's still a hardship, right? But when you go over that, that's a self-imposed problem, correct?
No, I disagree, and the courts would disagree. So the courts look at the person who's asking for the variance. Did they create the situation, the hardship that's there? And you can imagine, kind of, this is just a hypothetical, but you can imagine where if you owned a 1 acre lot and you deliberately carved off 1/10 of an acre, sold off 9/10, then left the little 1/10 of an acre, and then you came and said, now I need a variance because I have 1/10 of an acre and I can't meet setbacks or other development standards. That's a self-created injury because you did that. But the
Right.
courts say that if someone, your predecessors do it and you have a plan for it, that's not self-created.
And that's it, the owner, but the builder, the one that's buying it already knows that lot is there. So they're actually buying one. When they want to try and build that, then it's a self-created problem that they've got because they've got 637 feet that's buildable before they bought it. Now they're wanting to buy it, but they won't buy it until we make it buildable according to their terms.
So the courts actually say that's not self-created. Buying the property, knowing that you're going to have trouble hitting those development standards or knowing that you can't hit those development standards is not, according to the courts, a self-created injury because there's the possibility of a variance. And sure, it's not guaranteed.
Okay.
But the courts say it's just not self-created.
Okay. And you're saying the courts, and we've got a lawyer sitting right here that we can actually.
We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it as soon as you guys are done.
All right. So we're carrying further on that.
Continue on that line, I guess. I guess my question is, if you put and I'm not an attorney, I don't know this. If you put a contingency on buying a property based on whether you get a variance, doesn't that now make it self-imposed? Because the courts, according to what you're saying, the courts say that if you buy the land and then ask for the variance, that's not a reason not to get it, right? But if you're saying, I'm not going to buy it unless I get the variance, isn't that a self-imposed problem?
No, I don't think so with the case law that's there. Because people do lots of contingent deals with property. And I understand why it's tempting to say like, hey, you could have bought a different land. Why didn't you buy an easier parcel of land that you didn't need a variance on? You're creating the situation. But the courts say, no, that's not self-created. Because it's a situation that yes existed there and yes you bought it knowing that the zoning ordinance is going to be hard or you're not going to be able to do it without a variance. They say you did not create it, that situation. It's not a self-imposed.
I guess my second question is, again, I guess I just struggle with seeing this for the second time and the tentative plans being very similar, if not the same, and the various not meeting what those plans state. I mean, on the west shore or the west side parcel, I mean, you're 25 feet according to your building plans from the property line, or asking for 15. Like that 10-foot cushion and that cushion all the way around. I mean, it's difficult for me to, I guess, understand why I would vote on a variance that I don't know exactly what the concrete plans are.
Yeah, and I understand part of this is the reality of setback approvals, because with a setback, you're not approving any particular building plan.
No.
We want to show you a picture because we think it's important, because it does help you as a human being to say, what's the point? Why are we doing this? But so the superimposed house footprint you're seeing on there is one option. We would like to be able to build out to 15 feet if possible, because that gives me more flexibility with the house. It gives more parking, it gives options with the house itself. And so you're seeing one thing superimposed on there. I will note the drone photo that you see actually shows it to the full extent of the 15 feet. And so that's why that drone photo can be really helpful. It's not a survey drone, it's just a photo, but you can see how the full extent of that setback actually sits on that land. And I know it's kind of hard to separate. There's a human element of, I'd like to be able to approve a building plan itself, but that's not where we're here. It's just for setbacks.
I have two more questions and they're not for the attorney. I don't know if I should state them now, so everybody else. In our first meeting, there was some question about whether or not the parking along the street was, I don't know.
It's in the deed.
It's deeded that way, so people, so is public parking in that area or is it private? And is there an easement that crosses over this proposed parcel to get to those lake access? Because there's another lake access only parcel on the opposite side of it, correct?
Yeah.
So is there an easement built in there anywhere
Well,
that,
it's very odd. Steve provided this to the board, and I wasn't at the last meeting, but Steve provided this information to the board. I assume council's been made aware of this unusual circumstance with an agreement in 1990 with the previous owners, John T. Burns and Mary Ann Burns, with the Ooster bonds for the parking. You familiar with that?
I've heard it come up,
Okay.
especially in last.
So it's actually an agreement. It then was subject of a lawsuit in 2006, where it was an agreement that included that very provision was approved by the court. And then it ended up directly on the deed as a right. And I don't know how else you would call it, what you would call it other than an easement right, to park 3 vehicles on this particular lot in such a way so as it doesn't prohibit the Burns at the time from accessing Lake Maxatucky. So the question then, I think, is with the house you propose that Mr. Vakis is going to build, could the Oosterbond still exercise what appears to be an easement right to park 3 vehicles on that lot? Because otherwise we're falling under the second consideration, the use and value of the area and adjacent to the property included in the variance will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. Well, certainly can be argued that if the Oosterbonds have an easement right to park 3 vehicles on this lot, and you then build a house over most of the lot, is going to impact at least the Oosterbonds' ability to fully exercise their previously existing rights. Is that fair?
I think the argument's fair. I think it's not going to be true in this case. When you look at the description where that parking is allowed, sort of the ones in the southeast corner of the part that was carved off for the Oosterbonds, that little strip at the top. And also when you look
That's only
at
going to be 10 feet, right?
the strip that was carved off,
Well, no, according to your plans, it's going to be 10 feet. There's going to be a house before, other than the last 10 feet of the lot, there's going to be a house.
so if you go to page 5, maybe this is the best visual to look at.
Okay.
Such an odd shaped parcel, and visuals are like. So first off, on the left-hand side, you see the strip that was carved off and actually for the Oosterbonds. That was kind of the purpose of the 2020 replat. And then as you say, yes, there's a right to park on the subject parcel. Yep, down there where the development is planned. But our development's actually back from that kind of hook where you'd be parking vehicles. Our development's back on the flag part of the property. And
Yeah, sure. Well, that's where the house is going to be.
right,
So where are you saying they're going to park then? Because this is not their property here at the end of the road. They're going to have to go on to the property here at
yes,
the end of this, at the end of,
where it starts to
south-
crook. That's
south
where that's where they can park, is where it starts to crook.
yeah, isn't your house going all the way up here
It
to
is
within
not.
10 feet?
It is not.
Okay.
So I'm trying to find the best visual to do this. You'll just bear with me.
Maybe this one on your drone view, perhaps?
No, I think
No.
maybe 10. Yeah, we could look at that, but also if you go to page 10, you can see
Okay,
where the arrowhead, right on the right-hand side, where it starts to bend, that's where the parcel starts to bend towards the lake.
okay.
You got ahead of me before I could get to page 10.
Now this is the lake over here. Okay, yeah. So maybe Counselor, you could,
I think
we can make an exhibit of this.
from that point to that point is where the parking is.
This is this next here.
As to this question, Counselor, if you could, and I'm gonna put you on the spot, but if you could mark on an exhibit, so, and we'll put it into evidence, exactly where you think the 3 parking spots are gonna be.
Yeah, so I'm not a surveyor and I don't have.
I know, I'm not
like,
expecting you to be the scale or anything, but.
Right. So I understand it's a long south side drive
Right,
and it's 10 feet in. So you park in here.
okay. Okay. And the house ends here, you're saying this point here at the end of the road, how much is this?
So I think the easiest,
Because there's no setback here because this is the dog leg? Is that what you're saying?
the hash lines are the setbacks, right?
Yeah, okay,
And so between, for example, Southside Drive, we're all looking at page 10. Between Southside Drive and the setback that's being requested, it's 10 feet, but you can actually see to the point of the house that it's 12.2 feet. So if you have 10 feet to park cars in, there's plenty enough space to the setback. And actually with a 10-foot setback, you have 10 feet to park your car in.
Does it not the parking go from on this measurement or is this mark from this point to this point? Is
Even
there a road?
if it does, we can see from the survey, because it's a 10-foot setback, you got 10 feet until you get to any buildable space for approvals wise. So even if it goes all the way down to this corner, I'm sorry, I'm marking all over this.
all right,
But you can park all the way down there.
you're saying all the way, I don't care. Even it's starting partway, basically halfway down the house or a third of the way down the house.
What would be the length of that area? Because I mean, we're talking about 3 cars end to end.
I don't want to
We're
mark
not
you.
supposed to 50 feet. I just want to know what.
Well, we're gonna use this as some sort of an exhibit, because we have to have some sort of an answer to this question.
Sure. So I'm gonna circle what the surveyor is marking the distance as. And so the surveyor is marking the distance of that boundary as 86.79 feet adjacent to
Okay.
that.
No, that's not 87, that's
That's
south 730. 0.40.12. I don't know how to read all those.
Well, those are minutes and seconds, but I'm looking for feet.
The feet is a line under it.
She's younger than me, she can read it maybe.
86.7.
Yeah, I think she's right.
But we're talking probably 50 feet, right, for 3 cars?
Well, it's 87
6 feet.
feet.
Huh? No, I'm saying for 3 cars, what
Yeah.
we need for 3 cars along that line. I mean, we're talking right around the 50-foot mark, right, which is over
I mean,
half of this.
it would be- that's not gonna do it. It would be at least.
I'm gonna mark this exhibit A, okay? That way we have some idea
The cars.
of like what your argument is. No,
This is small
we're
car.
gonna keep that. These exhibits.
I'm sorry, folks.
Hey, please.
Town manager Kevin Dodd, if we could probably keep it down in the audience while the conversation
please.
we're recording.
We'll have conversations here and you will have a chance here in a little bit. But yeah, as part of the length of this right here, when you're talking 3 parking, is on that deed showing anything or is it showing?
37 feet, so if you said this, the cars are
Can you
37 feet.
wait till we have an opportunity, please?
Yeah,
Please.
I'd like to answer the question as best we can with the exhibits that we've submitted. So that line, the surveyor is telling us is about 86 to 87 feet. And so if you grant a variance up to 10 feet off of that line, because that's what we're asking for, you have a space that is 10 feet wide times the length of 86, 87 feet along the road. You can certainly park 3 cars in there.
Right, but then you're gonna have using the parking as a setback for the house being right before the cars. Input for each corner of the house.
I don't understand your question. What's your question?
Now, according to the drawing here, I mean, you're talking the corner of the house right here, and here's your setback for the right of way with easement, whatever you want to call it, for parking the cars. I mean, parking the car right next to the house.
Right,
What
I
he
think
said.
it's gonna be within a few feet of the house, yes,
less than 3 feet.
probably, yes.
Yes.
which,
As stated, as listed here, those two corner points are 12 feet, 7 inches.
right,
So if you're allowing a 10-foot, then the parking area, yeah, the parking area to the corner of the house would be 2 feet, 7 inches, which could possibly not allow for a door to be open without hitting the house.
Is that the corner of the house?
Yes,
Yeah.
by your,
yeah.
by what you have here.
Whatever.
Well, I would suggest one way, you're allowed to put conditions on a variance, as you well know. One condition that might be appropriate is don't put any doors on those corners that are close to that setback.
yeah.
And there aren't any.
No,
I just wanted
car
to be sure
doors.
what we had.
Oh, car doors.
Car,
are the same.
car door could possibly hit the side of the house when the car door is open.
I suppose if the house is built right up to that corner, that's something that's there.
Your own words were, you might like to build something bigger.
In terms of coming towards that west lot line.
Well, you said bigger.
I'd like to say one more thing, because I know you said this is not actually what they're proposing to build. You're just wanting setbacks.
Right.
And usually with a variance of setback, it's based on how much you need according to what you're building. But you're not building until after the setbacks. So what establishes the requirement of how much you need versus what you need because you gotta have a building or some place or reason for that variance?
Yeah, I hear the question
Okay.
because as a practical matter, oftentimes what you're asking for is based on what the plan you've already designed. And there is a plan here. I would say that the one thing that's kind of in a state of flux is how far towards the west property line you would build. We're asking for a setback of 15 feet that would allow us to go beyond the footprint you see in that one survey exhibit. But certainly you could build smaller than that. And so I know you're getting tired of me saying it. The law doesn't actually say that you have to ask for only the variance that we need. It's the variance that we think would be appropriate to build the thing that is aesthetically pleasing on the lot.
Right.
And so that's kind of the
But the law
backstory.
doesn't say that you have to approve any variance.
That's true. Definitely.
But that's stated, I'm just saying, with these variances, and a variance is permanent with the lot. Unless so changed by the source, basically. And what I'm saying is, I couldn't feel comfortable allowing a variance without knowing other than the width of where it's going to, for what reason. I mean, it's not creating, but we might be creating a problem for later, because those variances stay. I mean, and if this is not what we look at as far as another one, whatever, just a unique property, we don't base it on the property that's 3 blocks away. And if they get away with a 5-foot setback, doesn't mean that this should be allowed as well. See what I'm saying? This is only looking at this.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point, and why I emphasize that what's being asked for is the setbacks, those dash lines. And so what you're approving is to build something within those dash lines. We're superimposing one house footprint so you can kind of see, okay, where does this come from? How might it look? And so you're right, you're approving setbacks so that somebody can build something in those dash lines.
Right. If you don't build, let's say you don't build even close to those setbacks, you decide to build it just a little smaller, where you're just getting the 1,600 something square foot, what it requires, and that's what it calls for. It has to be minimum of that size. Okay, so you fit that. But the variance is there, and they decide to sell the property. Somebody else decides to build. Now they can build even a bigger one because the setbacks are set there. So I don't want to do a setback for whatever somebody buys it later. I'm giving a variance for whatever he wants right now.
Well,
And also, I mean, I know he was asking about the contract, but right now is this being wanting done because he wants to build something or because they want to sell property to him?
yes, and I can affirm to you, Lou Lucas wants to build this house. The thing that's in the state of flux is how far towards that western property line the house would actually extend. And so, yes, he wants to build that house. That artistic rendering, that's what he wants to build.
Well, what I want to see is that house. I want to see where the boundaries of the house that he wants to build, and then I can look and see where the variance will fit that.
So it would be that you
Is
see
this
on the
drawing
survey,
right here?
but take it all the way out to the 15-foot setback.
To take it all the way back.
Take it all the way back.
That was-
And that's what you're seeing on the drone
But that's
photos.
not in, but
But then why ask for the other 10-foot setbacks?
Those are, between the streets, the way they're reading the zoning code, is saying that you can't build within 25 feet
Why
of the
not,
street.
why not ask for 12'7" or 10'6"?
Because of the weird shape of the parcel, you have to go parallel with the lot lines to get the setbacks.
I mean, I understand that,
closest point, that
but I mean, like this, what you're asking for is 10 feet instead of, the closest point on these corners. So like on the north side where we have 10 feet for parking, instead of asking for the 12'7", you're asking for 10. So theoretically, you could build all the way up to that 10-foot mark. And now that parking is in flux.
Yes, and this has to do with uniformity of requesting for the setbacks. It's just much more uniform to ask for a 10-foot setback. It's easier for everyone to find, it's easier for a surveyor to put on there. It adds a little bit of flexibility for building the house itself. And like I keep saying though, this is not a request to approve a specific house itself, it's a request for those setbacks.
There is an easement that's legally binding, and that if we approve the 10 feet, now we come in jeopardy with, this legal easement, correct? Because we're giving you a setback all the way up to that legal easement.
And so it's consistent with the easement. And sure, maybe it's not the best parking easement ever drafted in the world, but again, Lou didn't draft that
And
parking.
that further amplifies the argument that you can't get out of the passenger side of the car. Because you won't even be able to open the door.
But it's consistent with the parking
But
easement.
consistent doesn't mean anything if it makes it completely inaccessible to get out of the car to park it there.
I don't think that's an issue actually look at as far as their car or whose car on my phone, but I think we're looking at setbacks. I mean, honestly, I'll say this again, without actual footprint drawing, I can't feasibly think that I would want to approve a variance of any footage other than what would be required for that.
I was ready to move on to another question unless you're still, is that
No,
a question?
I'm-
Okay. And council, maybe that's just a point where you can clarify for me. So the first step under practical difficulty is whether significant economic injury results if the ordinance is enforced. And let me just understand your argument. Your argument isn't that if they deny the variance, Lou Vacas is out money today, right? Your argument is that Lou Vacas can't build the house he wants on this lot, which will then improve the value of the lot and he will have equity in a house.
I would say that's really, really on close with our argument. You're right. He's not losing money until he builds a house. What he loses money on is the developability, if that's a word, of the lot. To build a house that is consistent with the general neighborhood. That's what the courts look at. And so if you build a house that doesn't look like the other houses in the neighborhood, it's not aesthetically pleasing, then that development is an economic injury to the person. And yes, it's not realized until you build or you can't build.
Yeah, don't we have to get past the first hurdle before we get to the second? I mean, we have to have an economic injury. The cases you cite, for example, I read them all. The Edward Rose case is discussing an already developed apartment complex in Marion County that has a sign out on the highway that is drawing in customers. And then they find that it's in violation of the building code and that they want a variance to keep it there. And the argument in that case was, well, if you don't approve the variance, it's going to cause me economic injury. And they presented evidence about the fact that they had a number of tenants that saw that sign and that's why they called and that's why they signed up leases. So this is an income producing property that could be impacted by the imposition of the variance. What your argument is that I want to buy what I know to be a small lot. The only way I could fit a 1,600 square foot house on is to build up. I'd rather not do that. I'd rather build out because that's going to fit the aesthetics of the community, and then I'll be able to have a much more valuable house. So, I mean, I feel like I don't know how you get past threshold 1 of economic injury, because if this gets denied tonight, Lou Vacas isn't out any money at all. he's only out money if, based on his theory that he can build a house there, if he was able to build a house there, it would be worth a lot of money.
Yeah.
Which I don't think there's any argument that it probably will be, but that's your argument. I'm not saying that's not potentially a valid argument. I don't think there's a case that says that, not that I've seen, that says you can base your economic injury on my speculation on the lot.
See, I disagree. And here's why.
Okay.
So it has to do with the nature of a variance. Many times, variances are requested before you build. In fact, probably more cases before you build, because you should get your approvals, unlike Edward Rose, because they put up the sign, didn't get their approvals, and the court said, you did that yourself. So most variances are being requested before you build. And so a lot of times demonstrating that injury is a hypothetical. It has to be if you're doing it correctly, because you're saying, here's what I'd like to do. May I have permission to do it? And so you don't get the injury until you actually build it. But the courts are looking, is the injury there? Is there an economic injury if you don't get that?
And I appreciate that you're coming ahead of time. I think that's admirable that you're coming beforehand, not just building and asking for permission or asking for forgiveness. But there aren't any cases that you cited so far that say what your theory is, which is that that you are causing economic injury to me because I cannot develop this lot the way I want to develop this lot, which an undeveloped lot. All the cases you cited are developed properties. Both of them involve signs, actually. So this is I just feel like it's a different animal, which fits with some of the board questions, which is, how is this not self-imposed? The next step, if I'm buying a lot I know the house I want to build won't fit on. Your theory, your argument was, well, if I'm the owner and I carve off a tenth and make it so that it doesn't fit, that would be self-imposed. Well, certainly you can't think that by signing a option to purchase with somebody else that cures that defect. There's no case that says that the subsequent, if I give you an option to purchase it, then you didn't create the problem, I did. That's just what you're saying.
So I think the problem with that argument is expecting there always to be a case that has facts similar to the case at hand.
And well, to be fair, you've
This is
said
kind of
several
like-
times to this board, the law says this, the courts say this, but that's not what these courts
The
are
courts
saying.
say the principles are true. The injury cannot be self-created. Like in
Right.
Edward Rose, they put up the sign without getting their approvals and then came back and said, hey, we're going to lose our sign if we don't get our approvals. And that's self-created.
But you're saying you're curing the Burns has created it, which were the Burns before these Burns. And then they created it and then you're saying, well, Lou's coming in here, he didn't create it, he's just trying to, but his option to purchase it and his subsequent purchase will cure anything that they did before. So it's not self-created by him. Yes, they created it. Which is the board, I think, is struggling with that theory. How could you just fix the problem by selling it to somebody else? And there isn't a case that says that you will cure it by, in both your cases, and actually both your cases, the Court of Appeals upheld the BZA's denial of the variance because they're saying that they put up the signs. In one case, the guy bought it. In the case you're citing, the guy bought the apartment complex with the sign already in place, but he then operated it for 15 years knowing that there was a problem with the variance and didn't do anything to fix it. And they said, well, you kind of self-created it there. So, I mean, I'm not sure that it's fair to tell this board, this is what the courts say, when there isn't a specific case on point on some of these points.
Yeah, I hear you. I just disagree because one, finding a case exactly on point is probably not going to happen. Sometimes it happens.
I
And the
agree.
principles
If you
still
made your
apply.
point, I know we're arguing the same thing. I'd like to kind of continue a little bit if we can. And no disrespect to her.
No, it's fine. That's
But
fine.
basically what we're looking at, I mean, according to the ordinances, and the building commissioner right here will tell you the same thing, that this lot is actually classified as unbuildable lot as it stands. And you're wanting variances to try and make it buildable on an unbuildable lot.
And
Now,
yeah.
without a structure that you want to put on them, and you say you want these variants ahead of time, and there's no reason, there's no hardship, no whatever, taking a blame of whose it is or what it is, you still have a lot that you're gonna have to require so many variances to build when it's on an unbuildable lot originally. And the buyers and the sellers, if they'd looked, they would have known that this was an unbuildable lot according to the ordinance. The only thing that you can actually build is 637 square foot buildable room. And now you're trying to get 1,600 and something square feet on 637 square foot. And we don't have the drawings or the footprint, site plan, other than this right here that you said is not legit, whatever. You can expand, or you can do what, and make it even more for the variances that we might give you. In other words, you're wanting a variance for setback that would allow you to do something other than this. And I don't think that's what a variance is for.
I'd like to address those points.
Yeah.
So the footprint that you see on the survey drawings is there is an illustration to help. And like I said, Lou really wants to build this house. And the only change that he's really thinking of footprint wise is, can you go all the way to the 15 foot? He'd like to do that. And again, you're not here to approve the building and stuff. I know that it really helps. He really does want to build it. And the only change really from that footprint is just going all the way to the 15 feet, which is why he's asking for the 15 feet.
Yeah. But again, he's asking also for 10 feet all the way around, which
Yeah.
even if that is not part of the thought process, like approving the request as asked would open up twice as much space on this parcel to build on.
Right, and that's what's being asked, so they can put a tasteful residence, because you look at the 637 square feet, and that's the other point I wanted to hit on, is that a lot being unbuildable is a function of, yes, the development standards, but also a question of, is there a variance that's appropriate that changes its buildability? It is very much a practical question. So a lot being buildable, it could be default perhaps unbuildable without a variance, but then becomes buildable with a variance. And so it is very much a practical question of whether something's buildable.
Yeah. But I mean, I don't know that the Board of Zoning Appeals, according to the ordinances, and we've already got an unbuildable lot, and it's non-conforming with the ordinance that we have in right now. Now, we're gonna try and take a non-conforming lot. We're gonna try and put, add all these setbacks for what you want on this, but it doesn't still make it conforming.
So I guess
Right.
that gets to the heart of a variance. The purpose of a variance is to say, like, strictly applied, the zoning ordinance says that we can't build on it.
Right.
However, the purpose of a variance is to say, is there a significant hardship, a practical difficulty because we're strictly applying it? And can we then say, in this case, we're going to make an exception, that's the purpose of variance, the exception to now make it buildable, developable, useful, adding something to the community rather than just staying as a vacant lot.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything to address? Okay, thank you for the presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Had questions. So I'd like to open up hearing for the audience. Anything more? No? Or you want to-
I make a motion, we open up the public hearing.
I second.
Okay.
All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. So anybody in the public, I want to just remind you that if you've already written letters, because I mean, we've all received letters, I want to ask the board, all members have read the letters and have considered these letters.
Yes, yes.
Yes, I've read
And then yes,
I've read every letter that has been
Okay.
previously submitted.
So all members have read it, so I just want to make sure.
I'd move to put those in the record. You need to create a record of what this board is doing. If you're considering the letters, then make the motion to put those in the record.
Okay, these motions, well,
We put all the letters in the record. Second.
you got to
Can
say.
identify what those are, Steve.
We'll say we're going-
The motion,
Dan
Are
made a
these, are
motion.
these all different letters or just two?
Oh, they're all different. There's 3 favorable, 4 unfavorable.
Has council gotten copies of these?
So all in favor to this motion?
Yes.
Aye. All opposed? So that said, now, I was gonna let the public know now, if you've written a letter and you're here, I'd rather not speak again on the letter, because we do have information here considered. That's for time's sake, for give another piece of time. But I would like to limit it to 3 minutes if you could. Anybody has anything to say? Or your name and address?
I'm Mike Kelly and.
I think you need to come-
Hold on.
So we'd like to come up to the
We need you
microphone.
to come
If
up
you want to
here.
come up to the mic, that's fine. If you can.
If they could come up to this table to speak.
Yeah, I know. I don't know if
He's
he's
having a little trouble getting there.
Well, I can take this to him
Can you
also.
take it to him? That's probably be a little help.
And you take the whole computer over there.
Okay.
Would you like a chair?
There you go, sir.
I'm good. Thank you. I live at 685 South Shore Drive, which is just across the street from this proposed development. And I've been here about 25 years. Used to be about 10 years. And my question is, number one, it's showing the super, I applied for the sewer. I understand. So you go over at South Shore, it's private sewers.
We can't do it.
That's what I'm saying.
Hey, Dad, you do it again.
He's asking
Thank you.
if they have a permit for the sewer, because you have to have a permit to hook up to the sewer system on the South Shore. So that was the first question, do they have that? And then his second question,
Then the question is, we were granted an exclusive easement by a judge in Plymouth back in the 70s. And Bob Tangy sued.
Can you address that when everybody's done speaking?
Sure. I don't know where that
Yeah,
either
we're
went.
not, we won't be able to answer questions. If you have concerns, and we'll take.
okay, all right, well, those were his concerns.
But after back and forth.
And what was it that he stated, asking?
The second thing was, we have an easement, which is right next to where they're proposing to build this property, and we want to know how it would affect our easement.
Is that the Oosterbaan easement from the deed?
No, we're across the street from where Tangy's house is.
Oh, you have another dog leg easement out to the lake?
Right, there's,
So you're on the east,
yeah, there's.
to the east of that. street.
Right, right, yeah.
Right,
Comes
and,
to that.
and we also want to know if there's a sewer, whatever for that.
Yeah,
Okay,
I
thank
don't
you.
understand that the city will not give any more permits to people at South Shore
yeah,
for sewers.
so
Okay.
that we're wondering like how they're supposed to build a house.
Right. So that question will come up later, but thank you. All right. Anybody else have, state your name?
Good evening. My name is Pamela Burns, and I'm the owner of the South Shore lot, along with my 3 children, Evan, Madeline, and my daughter, Amanda. We've been residents of South Shore for 50 years, over 50 years. In 1991, Marianne and Jack Burns, my in-laws, they purchased the additional lot that we're talking about, right adjacent to our property, with its dedicated pier. My family shared the cottage with my brother-in-law, Eric, and his family all these years. And you can imagine, with 7 children, 11 grandchildren, we've outgrown that cottage. So in 2022, Eric Burns came to the board and asked to have our entire lot replatted. It was all one, in order that both families could have a home. That replatting was done in 2022, and the board at that time said that each of the lots were buildable. Of course, he had a home on it, but we were instructed, yes, it is a buildable lot. And it's part of the record, you can go find it.
You're aware of that.
When the replatting was completed, Eric wanted to renovate his cottage. And so we came over the board and I think in 2022 also, an easement, not an easement, a variance. They got the variance to set back the new construction closer to the road. And that is exactly what Lou is asking for.
Because, but that's for two properties.
Yes, yes.
And
Now,
we're three
my-
members on-
the-
we're
the
three
property-
members.
Don't she got a minute?
The property that our property most affects the adjacent property. And I think you have a letter from Eric Burns that says he's happy to have this done. He sees no problem with it and it'll be part of, make the community better. Lastly, I'd like to address some of the safety concerns. And I think I can speak intelligently about that since we've raised 7 children, 8 children and 11 grandchildren on that road. Our family has never had an issue with safety. Our children played safely in the yard. They crossed South Shore Drive to get to the lake and it was never an issue. In fact, it's one of the things that I love most about Culver, that our children had the ability to play safely and have a summer of exploration and independence here. And that's what makes Culver great. So as much as I wanted to build a house, health concerns prevent me. So we are selling the lot.
Okay.
Thank you for your attention and thoughtful
Thank you.
consideration.
What's your name?
Janice Coleman.
Please come up here so we can be.
I'll be brief, and I am part of the Ulsterbahn property. But I just would like to add that it's my understanding that the establishment of setbacks are for the purpose of protecting the beauty and health of our lake and protecting adjacent neighbors and their properties. And this variance request negatively affects all of those things, is my feeling. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Anybody else? Anybody online? Or they just,
There's several people online. Nobody has their hand raised at this time.
concern or against?
If I may, if anybody have at this time online who has a comment, you can unmute and speak if you like. I see none at this time, Mr. President.
I make a motion to close the public hearing.
A second.
Have a first and second, close. All in favor? Say aye.
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 Okay, I might jump in here just because it's important that you make a record of what you do tonight, your reasons, as you go through this findings of fact. This is a voting findings of fact, but we'll need to prepare an actual more detailed findings of fact that includes your reasoning here during your discussion and your ultimate vote. Because if council wants to appeal this for her client, she's going to need a findings of fact to do so. She's going to, the court's going to look at the record you created. So we've got some letters in, we've got an exhibit in. We'll admit council's presentation and her the initial petition, whatever you called it, was a petition.
It's an application and then a
Application.
memorandum in support.
And you want your PowerPoint in there?
Yes, please.
Okay. And then there was some discussion there about a previous replatting and minutes from previous meetings. Are those in the record or going in the record?
What's in our folders here?
I can address that. So they should be exhibits to our memorandum.
Okay.
The 2021 replat, 22 replat, as well as that, it's a plan commission minutes. I think you'll find them as exhibits to the memorandum.
Okay. I know I read them somewhere. I wasn't sure where. And there's no transcript of that hearing. It's just the minutes we're relying on, right?
Right.
So if there's any other exhibits or things you're going to rely on, you want to put them in your own research, but then otherwise.
Yeah, we do want to do your finding facts written out before we ever.
Well, I would just go through each one if you don't mind. I mean, this is your time to discuss and throw out your thoughts, and then you can formulate that into a motion when you reach some sort of conclusion. Okay. So number one, the general welfare, the approval so I may preface this, the applicant has the burden of proof. What that means to you is that if she didn't carry the burden of proof, if the applicant didn't carry the burden of proof, then you can disagree. But if the preponderance of the evidence is that you should agree with their proposal on each point, then you can agree to it. I mean, but they have to carry the burden of proof. If there's no evidence on an issue, then they may have failed to meet their burden. Okay. So one, the approval will not be injurious to the public health. So let's start there. I don't know if anybody's got any thoughts on that.
And my biggest concern would be that 10-foot easement for parking with the variance request up to 10 feet off the road.
So you think that might create a dangerous situation?
Or
Okay.
a foot to 3 of the house.
If you add to that too, as far as using the property that's to the east, as far as from that too, other people are using that property as well for recreation. On half of those people could actually build on that property as well.
You lost me. You have to explain that again.
Property to the east.
Yeah.
On the lakeside, part of that open lot, there's nothing built over there. Now, is that
Can't be.
unbuildable?
It's unbuildable.
It's a little distressed.
No, I'm talking about on the other side.
The east is just a strip of easement from the south side of South Shore Drive, those residents there, it's their easement to the lake.
There's not.
Is this under public health? What's your concern?
Well, public health, I was talking about as part of being open for kids that are going playing through that only street where all this parking goes.
Right.
I mean, the parking's in front of this lot that we're talking about right here.
Right.
And the south side drive goes through and the dead end right there.
Right.
Goes into open area.
Right.
And this is where I understand there's golf carts, there's everything.
They come
else
from
up
the
there.
top of the hill and they come down. They don't go down South Shore Drive. They have their own
So
easement.
they're restricted from coming.
Yes, they have their own easement.
Not trying to stop you from it. This
No.
is your discussion time.
Right.
You've heard evidence. You're going to have a very difficult record to listen to if you keep asking
I
questions of
understand
the
what you're saying,
applicant.
but I'm talking about as far as safety.
Okay, what's your safety concern?
Safety concern is children being from other properties going in through there with that being there, the parking and everything else. It's gonna pretty well contain where kids are gonna be accessible to whatever.
And we had more than ever, and we never had an issue with the people that come down.
Oh,
Okay, so anything else on public health?
No.
Okay, and I assume you said something about safety in that explanation, so that falls under safety?
Right.
Okay, how about morals? I didn't hear anything about morals or any concern over morals, correct?
Correct.
All right. And then the general welfare of the community. You've heard from a couple of people in letters and discussions on what they think is the welfare of the community, but of that neighborhood. But what do you guys think?
I don't have anything. It's just the concerns that were expressed as far as the general welfare by the surrounding residents
In their letters?
in their letters.
Okay,
Recognize so
anything else? Okay. And I'm not asking you to vote yet. We're just having a discussion.
Right.
So the adjacent property, the use and value of the area adjacent to the property included in the variance will not be affected in the substantially adverse manner. Did you hear enough evidence that the requested variance, if granted, would not negatively impact the neighboring properties?
The only thing that I heard was that I don't know if it's written anywhere that there's an easement for people to walk across this property to get to their own lakefront lot. So that would be the only thing that I could think of that would cause somebody on an adjacent property.
I didn't see any evidence of an easement across any of my understanding, all these properties dogleg out to the lake.
Yeah.
And so everybody's got access to the lake, but I'm not aware from the evidence of any easement across any of those doglegs.
Yeah.
Other than hearing that people have, in the past, have run across that and enjoyed that. So then, if this is put in, then that could affect that.
I mean, if it's legally binding someplace. then-
Well, I think it's without question that nobody that goes out there, there's no fencing, there's no state lines, it's,
Not a requirement.
I'm sure it's legally, they're supposed to stay on their
Yeah.
easement, but I mean, there's no doubt that, and it was explained by people that lived there for 25 years. And I'm sure everybody runs all over everybody's property out there. It's a big open grass lot. So you think maybe that's gonna impact the other property owners some way?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm not trying to commandeer the whole discussion. You guys have other just things on that point. I just want to get through these. All right, so then the third one is the strict application of the terms of the zoning ordinance will result in practical difficulties. And then you have to, for the practical difficulties, as council pointed out, you're gonna have to go to your own definition of it, which matches the state statute definition, which number one is whether significant economic injury will result if the ordinance is enforced. So you have to make a decision about the issue which was discussed at length, which is, are you causing, by enforcing the ordinance, would you be causing Blue Bacchus or Vukas, I'm not how to pronounce his name, economic injury? Well, the argument from council is that it's, of course, well, we're not gonna be able to build the house we want, and then we won't be able to capitalize as much on the value of that lot. And the house, you know, a smaller house wouldn't be worth as much, obviously. I think that's a, you know, a speculative damage in the future. I mean, are you causing any economic damage to Blue Bacchus today by enforcing the ordinance? That's what you have to decide. Or if you want to accept council's argument, you can do that.
But would it also, I mean, look as far as you're talking about the economic gain, would it be economically even as far as to the neighbors? I mean, would you reduce value, whatever, for that, or gain value?
I don't think that's a consideration.
Should that be considered?
No,
That would be.
that would go up in the second, number two there. If you're impacting
Right.
negatively the other properties by granting it, that would fall under number two. If you have some concern that a house there is going to impact it. Otherwise, this is, are you causing, by enforcing the ordinance, are you causing significant economic injury to Mr. Vukas?
I guess the question becomes, whether or not it's an economic injury to him if he's not the owner of the property, since he's not the owner of the property currently.
I think you're 100% right. I think the Burns certainly have an argument that you're impacting the economic you could potentially simply impacting them economically, because that lot, if it's buildable for a house, is going to be worth a tremendous amount of money. If it's not worth much.
And since they are currently the owners, then and they're not the ones that are requesting the variance. So I would be of the opinion that this doesn't, the loss of economic gain to the petitioner is not a matter because they're not the owner. And the value of the property is currently of the owners.
That's one theory. The other thing you could consider is that there's no evidence been presented to you in any presentation as to what the impact will be on the value of that lot. I made a statement that it seems like it would, but I have no evidence of that. I don't have a purchase agreement. I don't have a option to purchase, anything like that would say what this lot would be worth if we could sell it and put a house on it. So there isn't any evidence on it. I don't think you get to steps 2 and 3. That's my argument. I don't think you have to debate whether or not an injury is the economic injury is self-created when there wasn't if there isn't an economic injury. Or whether there's feasible alternatives. There's other cases on practical difficulty, which include, some of the cases council pointed. One was in Long Beach that included building a retaining wall, and it wasn't practical to build it anywhere but where it was, based on the topography of the lot. But you don't have those issues here.
Right. I mean, the issue as far as the ownership,
Yeah,
the applicant is going to buy the truck.
well, I think
And we don't have proof of that because it's not.
I think we should get the board's opinion on
Because
whether,
if we don't approve this, are they gonna buy it?
I think the board should weigh in on, despite my my own opinion on it. I think the board should weigh in on, you think when you are a buyer of a lot that is not buildable in the fashion you want it to be, that
And I brought
that you
that up earlier.
that you made that point, that that you are inherently creating the problem, that the purchase of the lot doesn't cure the fact that the previous owners created a non-buildable, or a lot that was buildable the fashion you want it to be built. Whether it's buildable is another issue for the building department. I mean, this is whether the variance be granted. I don't know whether it's buildable or not. It's not really that important.
No, I'm just saying the lot itself is not.
Yeah, right.
Presented to meet the ordinances as far as what size house is built. Amendments required. And also, I mean, if there's other reasons that you have other than these three.
Yeah, you can give other
You can
reasons.
agree on all three and that meet the.
You can have other reasons.
You can still vote out, I mean, whatever. And I'm just saying for the public, it's not just because all these are agreed on, there still could be reasons.
Yes, you're not hamstrung. You can give other reasons. You have to address these three. So with that, I leave it to you guys to address the vote on those. Busted.
Yeah.
Script. Don't worry about it.
So if these variants were granted and what's his name, Bucas, whatever, if he decided sometime before this went through and broke contract and did not buy, then the property would already have these variances on here regardless.
Are you soliciting more information from the applicant, or are you just discussing?
I'm just discussing.
Okay.
I'm just saying after the 4 years.
Okay.
So, I mean, I just want to be aware that this variance is a permanent variance on this property, regardless who sells and who buys.
Do you have a business card?
Thanks.
Everybody got their findings.
But I'm not ready yet.
Oh, man.
With them faded boy.
We can complete it after too, can we?
You need to vote on your decisions, so I would take everybody's and read them out,
Time to do whatever.
read out everybody's reasoning, and then vote on each issue.
Okay.
I think get them to you.
As far as finding facts.
I'm not ready yet. So I'm still writing.
Just to be clear, the official findings of fact will come from the board president after we've had a chance to draft it, considering all the exhibits and the presentation. But you do need to have a vote of the board tonight and articulate some of your reasons.
Yeah. But we can, once I have these filled out, we can actually bring to a close, just go here and record.
Yes, you can admit that into the record, yeah.
Then as far as the votes, when you want, why we voted.
Right.
Not for what this was. I mean, if you disagree on.
Not everybody has to agree on the reasons. All you have to do is list the reasons and then vote on each issue.
So that would be a roll call vote.
Yeah.
We vote on.
Yeah, you can do that.
We got a roll call vote on your finding of facts or on the motion to. You're saying we have to.
I'm just saying, do a roll call vote on these, everybody vote, and then you're gonna admit all of these individual findings of fact from each board member into the record. Then we will create findings of fact for the applicant that they can then use if they plan to challenge the board's decision.
Right, but we still have to, whether we have to motion whether to approve or disapprove.
Yeah,
the variance.
right, that's what I'm saying. Take a vote on each one of those issues.
We've always had a vote as far as.
He means vote to approve or disapprove.
Approve or disapprove.
Okay.
For the minutes.
Right, I thought that was what I was saying. Maybe I'm not being clear.
I mean, the finding of fact is one thing and the approval is the other.
Okay, that's fine.
Am I correct?
Either one that's in the record, either way.
Yeah, I mean, they're both in the record this way. I mean,
right.
If everybody done the finding of fact, then we can actually entertain a motion to.
I make a motion that we take a vote on the variance requested for petition number 2025-B11. I need to read the whole thing out.
No, I think everybody, it's in the, it's already application and everything. Everybody knows what you're talking.
Okay. got a motion, hey? Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I got a first and a second.
Okay, what is the exact motion again?
That motion is to approve the variances requested, which are
To approve or vote to
No,
approve?
to approve.
to make a vote on the variance requested for petition number 2025-11. Make a vote.
To approve.
No,
No.
didn't say to approve.
No, he said, made a motion
To,
to vote on
okay, to vote.
the petition.
Either way. we'll do-
I think if you do roll call, then
Yeah,
they
it's
can
gonna be a
say,
roll
they
call,
can
because
say
you're
yea or nay
I'm
on
gonna
it.
do a roll call, so it's gonna be a yea or nay. Call it nay. Which, either way, okay, Mr. Rushing,
We're gonna go through the three findings of facts.
well, you can explain why you agree or disagree, I guess. And maybe report on this, but
For general welfare, I disagreed. I'm concerned about the 10-foot north side setback impeding on or becoming dangerous with the 10-foot legal easement for parking. I agree with the adjacent property. I don't think that it will affect it in any way. Practical difficulty, the lot size with strict applications of the ordinance would allow for a smaller home to be built. The applicant is not the owner of the property, so no economic injury is applicable. And the applicant is aware that the small, unusual shaped parcel would not support the expressed build. And then for asterisks, I just put in there that the variance requests do not specifically state the reason for their distance. Does not align with the proposed structure. I know we're not voting on the building plans, but with an unusual shaped parcel that has this much kind of variation, in order for to be considered, I would hope that they would give us the exact lines they wanted in block. So,
okay. Mr. Osborne,
I agreed on the general welfare, I agreed on the adjacent property, I disagreed on the practical difficulty based on the fact that, in my opinion, practical difficulty, there was no practical difficulty because you're not the first lot.
Okay, so you agreed on question 1,
To
question 2,
and disagree.
and disagreed on 3.
Mr. Chris,
I vote against all 3. Regarding 1, the parking easement that's currently with the land and where the proposed corners are causes difficulty to the safety of people parking those cars. There has been a history of injuries there to animals and people. This would further exacerbate that issue. As to adjacent property, the increased traffic that would occur due to building this house and the size of this house and the number of people that could occupy the house, that increased traffic could create a greater nuisance. And that does affect the adjacent property owners. Lastly, the practical difficulty is that there is no evidence of a loss since the petitioner is not the owner.
and Chair. Chair, yeah, general welfare, I agreed. I think there was enough there to disagree. And as far as the adjacent property, I agreed as well. Not that I agreed 100%, but I did agree on this. And as far as practical difficulty, I disagreed on that because I feel like getting giving a variance for a structure that's not as established, knowing the distance actually needs to be done. When you're asking for 10 feet, and you might be getting by with 12 feet or whatever, and we don't know. So it's still an if situation as far as the variances being permanent and then having an actual distance as far as why the variance should be that distance or whatever. And also, the seller is not the applicant, but the seller can benefit from it, even if the buyer does not buy, because those variances would be permanent, which would be considered a permanent buildable lot, which could be an economic gain for each one. So I just disagree.
Okay, so you agreed on 1 and 2?
I agreed on 1 and 2, and
Okay.
disagreed on 3.
Yeah. Do you need a motion to
approve?
To call a vote? I'll motion that we vote on this petition now.
Okay, and it'd be the same way. It would be by roll call. And
You need a second.
can state, yeah. But you'll be able to state yes or no, as far as what you want to do. So you make the motion to,
I motion to vote on the petition.
oh. Okay. So I'll start with,
Yeah,
You need a second.
I said,
oh, God, yes, that's, yeah.
you need a vote.
All right, all in favor? For the motion,
We need to do a roll call.
do a roll call.
But you said roll call.
And you just have a motion, second.
Vote, we motion to vote, then you have to do the roll call.
Yeah, we wouldn't have to prove it, but motion, that's right. All right, Mr. Melton,
disagree,
Mr. Osborne,
disagree.
and
Disagree.
and the president, Manway, I disagree. Thank
Make a
you.
motion that we enter these findings of facts into the record.
And your second, and second.
Vote.
We need a vote.
You need to vote.
No, wait. Got motion second, first and second. All in favor?
I know.
You missed one.
Andrew motion. Who seconded? And that was to
Enter,
Enter the records.
enter the finance of that.
The full record. In favor for that. Hearing?
aye.
Aye.
Okay, what do you need now?
I didn't date that. I should have that time.
Dates on.
Based on that.
Yeah,
You want to just make a statement of the result of the vote?
Statement. Okay, I mean, according to the vote, we just, it did not pass. So that's not. Next page. Next page, petition number 2025-V-Twist. Petition's been filed by Mallory Ritchie on behalf of Mark Kelly. Fortunately, the objection to number to request approval for the variance of development reduction of required rear yard setback 25 feet to 10 feet 9 inches for construction of new single family home.
If I may,
Yes, you may.
uh, so Mallory I'm sorry, Mallory Ritchie is online. She was unable to be here in person.
Okay,
Give me a minute.
do we have anybody representing the, you are
I'm Martin Kelly.
Martin Kelly. Yeah,
I'm gonna let Mallory handle all the particulars.
Hold up one sec.
Give me.
Secretary, yeah, situated here.
I'm ready.
Now, need an address again?
I'm Martin Kelly, 422 West Jefferson Street. Our builder's on call, but just a little history. My wife and I have been visiting Culver since 2008. 2018, we bought this house with the intention of someday retiring here. Well, someday is next spring. So we're looking forward to being permanent residents and building this house that will accommodate our family when they come to visit. One thing I would like to point out to you guys is that's not shown on the plot plan is, and I never did this, so I didn't print anything out, so I'm just gonna walk around and show you. Right here is a 12 by 10 shed, which is like 4 feet off the property. Oh, it's short. Okay, my intention wasn't to get rid of that, but if it would help with the variance, then I'm willing to give that up to get the variance. Kind of as a trade-off, I guess, because it is entirely in the setback.
You wanna put that in?
Yeah, so this here,
There's a shed in the aerial photo that's not depicted in.
that's not shown here.
Here, okay.
Yeah, and wasn't going to get rid of, but I'm willing to get rid of it if it would help, you know, with the variance. So, and then I think that's about all. I think I don't really have no experience in this. I'm gonna let the professionals handle it.
You did pretty good so far.
It's just a place. Oh, yeah, like.
She not present anything or?
Well, Ms. Ritchie, did you have any statement?
So we're not, what we're trying to build, the veranda actually encroaches that rear build line by 10 feet, 9 inches. So we're just asking to be able to build that veranda and not necessarily reduce the rear setback to 10 feet, 9 inches. It's just reducing it far enough so we can build that rear veranda and make everything accommodable and fit on that lot.
So they want the north yard setback to be 14.1 feet,
Yeah,
not the 10.9. It
Correct.
goes into the setback 10.9 feet. So they're
Mhm.
actually for a 14.1 foot setback.
yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And that is a covering to a porch, or what exactly is that?
Yeah, it's a covered rear veranda, so it would be a footered patio with a covered roof on it with ceiling and
Okay, and the current storage building, is it on a concrete pad?
It is
And what size is it?
10 by 12.
And how far is the northern side of that shed to the property line?
About 5 feet.
Okay, you said it was 10 by
12.
12. So then actually it's the southern part of it, or the front of it, so to speak, will be approximately 17 feet from the property line.
I believe so, yeah, I guess that's the right math, right?
But either way, the northern edge of your proposed porch would be further from the property line than the current shed is. Now, my last
Correct.
question is, where does this veranda that's causing the encroachment, where does it fit relative to where the shed is?
So the shed is in the north west corner, towards the northwest corner.
Right.
Yeah, and the veranda is more towards the east, like,
So I think to back up just a little bit, the intention is tear down the existing dwelling and
Right.
rebuild a new one.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't hear that.
Same footprint.
No,
No, different footprint.
Uh,
Yeah, I just threw the shed in there as I, you know, like I could
Yeah.
get rid of that to, if it would help, just the variance. But
I drove by and looked at that, and I saw that the garage was separate,
yeah,
and it was kind of angled. I'm assuming that the proposed house is gonna have a garage.
yes.
Okay, then, the question kind of becomes, what is the impact on permeability by the fact that it looks like you're probably gonna have a smaller footprint when you look at your proposed to what is actually there presently now between the house and the garage. There are two separate structures.
When you say permeability, I don't
And
understand.
that would mean
lot
like
of coverage.
grass, like you have to have,
Water can pass through it.
water can pass through it.
So that currently, I have a sewer in my yard. I don't know if you're familiar with this property. This property used to flood. This house was 2-3 feet underwater numerous times back in the day. So there is a sewer in the yard, which is roughly behind it. It's, I don't know. Chris is my neighbor. I don't think 15 feet off the property line.
You
Stormwater.
want to call it as far as water.
Yeah, and there's a swale.
Drainage.
Stormwater drain. It's called stormwater.
Stormwater drain. Yeah,
So
we
there's
don't
a
call it
swale that's gonna remain, and that water will continue to flow to that sewer. It's in everybody's best interest, you know, mine and everybody around me, because that was, from what I understand, was pretty bad.
Yeah.
For the minute, I don't want to call it a sewer.
I'm sorry, storm drain.
I mean, just kind of looking at trying to compare it, you have to have 51%, or is it
50.
greater than 50?
It has to be a maximum of 50% impervious or 50% lot coverage, which includes the structure, sidewalks, driveway, decks, porches.
Mallory would have to answer that
yeah,
question.
so I had, so impervious area is 4,926 square feet. The pervious area is 8,372 square feet.
Pervious is 8,000?
So they're.
Okay, so
Yeah.
they're okay. Okay, you're okay.
Right. I just said that, so that's good.
That kind of thing. Anywhere else, right? Put pressure on that.
And I would like to just, if you don't mind, just point out one other thing is when, like the sight line, so if you're standing in my yard and you look east, you see my neighbor's garage. Because he is all the way to the property line. So, and then when you look west, you look from Donald's yard, and the other house, third lot's a little deeper, so you see their house. So we're really not blocking anybody's view either, you know what I mean? Looking, there's someone sitting in their yard, so I mean, we're kind of blocked anyways already.
Right.
Really. By seeing drawings, you're 25 feet from the property line. The the front of the house will be set back in your yard 25 feet
Our
from the
front,
property.
yes, yes.
With
The
this
house
where the
will be-
proposed house would be.
But the encroachment itself is what talking about as far as needing to.
Well, I'm just talking about the
Input
yard, you know, the line of sight in the yard.
Right.
Is
Yeah.
like, you know, there's no real line of sight because
Right.
I got garage on either side.
No,
Or
what
garage.
I'm saying, you're just needing the,
The neighbors to the east, their house appears to be closer to the street
than what.
than your current house is.
Yeah,
And
we're
And-
staying within the 25-foot setback at the front.
All the other setbacks, or is this drawing or,
I mean, all you're asking for is the 10'9"
To put the veranda.
inch.
Yeah, for the veranda.
Actually, 14.1 corrected.
Yeah,
Because
so
of
we're
that
only
road.
asking to have a 14-foot like rear setback instead of 25 feet, just so that rear covered veranda can be included since it encroaches 10 feet 9 inches.
Oh, the encroachment's 10. Okay,
Uh,
gotcha.
It appears that the neighbors to the north of the property,
Right.
is their yard partially fenced?
Yeah, and it appears to be on their property too, looking at the aerial. It crosses the property line.
Man,
these lines
yeah,
are not always accurate.
yeah, but we know that those pictures are not exact.
Right.
Okay, but yeah, I was just questioning whether or not there was a fence there. There is no alley access.
No.
So by removing the shed, you're actually gonna be further away from the fence.
Okay.
Almost 9 feet.
Something like that.
But
You're at 5 feet. 10 feet.
but the little shed is already
Oh, we're fine.
within the setback. Not.
Well, if he's gonna remove
If
the
I can,
shed.
if I comment on the shed,
Yes.
that's 120 square feet. Our ordinance says 120 square feet or less doesn't even require a building permit. It just has to be within, this is gonna be grandfathered in, it's because they're, but it has to be within the setbacks.
Right.
So in this case, it's already in existence. It has
I
been.
wouldn't say, I don't see why you go into it. It's already there.
Yeah, I just addressing his fact that he said he might remove it. So. So the question then, I guess, becomes to me, since this is new construction. To address the back porch, the overhang of the back porch.
Is the veranda gutter, does it have any kind of overhang, or is the 10'9"?
That
Is that
includes the overhangs.
Okay. So it's actually 14.1 to the overhang. It's not the foundation.
How much of an overhang is there? Is that a
The overhangs, let me pull up that plot plan again really fast. Overhangs, I believe I think they're 12-inch overhangs. So
Same
they're
as
12-inch they're 12-inch overhangs on the front side and rear gable ends, and
Okay.
then 16-inch overhangs on horizontal soffits. And the way the plot plan is drawn and presented, that's to the overhangs with that encroachment was the 10 feet 9 inches.
Questions?
Make a motion that we open this to the public input.
We can, or is that,
I'll second.
okay, first and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
All right. Anybody have any comments to the public or anybody? You're good?
No.
Demi?
We're in favor of it.
You're
They
good,
both live
good.
behind me.
Please,
Either house
please,
behind me.
if you said something, please stand up and identify yourself, give your address, please.
Oh, okay.
If you won't say anything, yeah,
I'm Chris Nemick. I
I'm
live
sorry, spell it, please.
behind him
you must spell it.
and I am in favor
Spell your name
They're
again.
great neighbors. Pardon?
Spell your name and give your address, please.
Okay, Chris, CHRIS, Nemick, NIEMIEC,
And your address is,
413 West Washington, directly behind them.
okay.
And you say,
And they're great neighbors.
the neighbors,
Couldn't ask for better.
thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other concerns or anything anybody else wants to say? We have anybody online, have any concerns, comments?
We have people online, but I don't see
Just listening.
anyone with additional comments.
I'll make a motion that we close the public hearing.
Got first,
I'll second.
and I got a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. Next,
Building commissioner, do you have any concerns
do
with?
you have any concerns with this? I brought it to you.
Concerns, not much, but I note they're 25 feet back from the front, that front setback. You can move that up as much as to a 13-foot setback in front, which is an average of the other houses on the street setback. That in of itself doesn't require variance. That can be granted by me. If you did,
Say I move the house up so they don't need a
You're saying
variance
if
to
you're
do it.
gonna move it forward?
it's something that could be done. I'm just saying that.
Is that?
Oh, in other
something
words,
they
if
consider?
the 25-foot setback on the front yard is not necessary for that house, if you wish to.
They could make that, they could make the other
You can actually line them up. If you wish,
11 feet up if that
if you
was,
want the bigger front yard.
but that's not what he's asking.
Yeah, I mean, we really like the bigger front yard, so that's why we're here.
But you would, yeah.
If he does move it up, then you can just park in the driveway.
So, but I mean, our building commissioner will just let you know that he has.
So, and then I guess I'd have a question for you. When this all started coming about too, there was some question about the driveway and the size of the driveway, wanting a wider entrance, which can't happen for our,
No.
because that's within our ordinance.
That's not shown on this one, right? When you have.
Right.
Yeah.
But your plan is to have a off-street parking,
Standard driveway, like,
yeah, and widen it out so you have room for what, at least a couple cars off street?
yeah, I mean, it's. Like you said, standard, whatever you said, I mean, it's 20 foot or something, whatever the standard driveway is, that's what we have.
And that's the entrance, as it get wider in your yard.
Yeah,
So again, that's just to my point that,
okay.
so there can be off-street parking.
Yeah, so we're just gonna do the standard cut in at the road, what would require the ordinance, that would meet the ordinance. So there would still be off-street parking available, so it wouldn't be as wide.
Question from the board. So we want to go to the finding the fact. And do it the same way or? That's
Absolutely.
Everybody ready? We'll start the first one.
Don't we have to have a motion to do that? We did that last one,
All right, motion to,
didn't we? Didn't you make a motion that we go to a finding of facts?
or to,
No,
I think you're still in the discussion phase right now.
Oh, okay.
we could go to that, everybody ready? They have got what they want to discuss, whatever they want.
Make sure get this right. Okay, so you're calling for the finding of facts.
We can start with general welfare, and then roll call, so same as we did before. So, Mr. Nelson,
I agree with general welfare.
okay? Want to go on down?
I agree with the adjacent property. I agree with practical difficulty.
For comments? Mr. Alborn,
I agree. with general welfare. I agree with adjacent property and I agree with practical difficulty.
Okay, Chris? Good, I'm ready.
I agree on all three. General welfare, the adjacent property and practical difficulty.
And the chair, Barry, Nelly. I agree on all three, general welfare, just property, practical.
Making
Record.
I make a motion, we approve the variance.
Second.
A first and second to approve. We'll go by the roll call, the bell. So. Motion has to be approved, we can take the vote. Motion to approve.
We gotta vote on.
Motion to approve. In favor of the first and second.
Aye.
All in favor?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. The back and up going forward. No. Yes, we have a vote. Make motion to that record. We have a vote. All right. How do you vote? Yes or no, Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Yes. You're out one.
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Chair votes. Approved.
Yeah, I'd also have you guys make a motion to admit the three exhibits that were presented by the applicant and the record.
I make such a motion.
I'll second that. Second.
I got a first and a second to approve that or to enter these in.
Yes, you
Let's
got
see, it
those,
was with the three.
Three
The
exceptions.
three,
Well, it was
the three exhibits.
the three exhibits.
the three exhibits to be entered.
They weren't all from the applicant,
Okay.
Or wherever they were from.
just the exhibits.
The first and second, in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Sorry, who motioned?
I did.
Who seconded?
Dan did.
Yeah, just so you know, every time you make approve a variance or deny a variance, it can be appealed to the court.
Right.
And the court's gonna look at your record when they decide whether or not what you did was right or wrong. So if somebody wanted to challenge this, even if you approved it, somebody said, I don't like that they approved it, and challenge that court, they're gonna rely, what'd you base your decision on? What's your record? So that's why you want to admit exhibits. You want to have documents that you relied on, pictures, whatever.
Right. We've always put our finding facts on it. But I know what you're talking about as far as even if you
So the
approve.
findings of facts different. Findings of facts, your written opinion
Right.
and decision. That is not your record of the documents you relied upon.
I never said yay. I was busy typing when.
I realize that. I didn't say it was approved yet.
Okay, I,
You're saying aye?
Yeah.
Curious? Okay. For the record.
Do you need a motion to enter the findings of facts? These exhibits also.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Okay.
Make sure it's clear.
Make a motion that we enter the findings of facts to the record.
First
okay, okay.
and a second. Dan? Yeah, first and second, so.
Hold on. I'm not that fast of a typer. Okay, who's second?
Dan second.
Okay.
And approved.
You gotta vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Aye. Opposed? Same sign.
So what's the result?
Yeah, approved.
Motion passed unanimously.
Motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Good luck with your new house.
Yeah.
Keep doing it.
And
Gotta give this.
That's,
Thank you.
that's for recycling purposes.
and thank you, Miss Ritchie.
Thank you, Steve. Have a good night.
You too.
I know Steve's working on rules for the board. Probably fix some of these problems by just putting into rules. Anything anybody ever puts in their discussion is automatically admitted into the record. And put that in the rules. You don't have to worry about all this.
Motion it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's something you want. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, this,
whereas that kind of,
We'll address that then.
we
when
would
get to
address
the
that, because I
Old
mean,
and new business.
going
I think
from
that's-
motion to motion to motion.
well, I know he's working on, he didn't have it ready yet. So,
Okay, next petition number 2025-B13, been filed by Frank Bianchi. 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 And it's for request of variance development deduction of the required rear yard setback from 10 feet to 2.5 feet construction of garage.
Frank Bianchi. It's Bianchi. And we're 404 South Main Street. Yes, to give it a little history, like the last roof, we bought this house in 2018. We're renovating it right now, and we plan on retiring in that house around next spring also. So we love the community, and what we want to do is there's an existing one-car garage that's in pretty bad shape there. It's leaning. We want to tear it down and put up a new garage that's a three-car bay with a patio on the end. And it's virtually the same setback as the current garage, but just pushed back in the lot a little bit. And it's along a utility easement there that is sodded and also maintained by us. We cut it to grass. I guess, is there any questions other than that?
But you're still coming off of Mill Street, correct?
Yes, yeah, we want the access on Mill Street still, not on Main, because that, it's busier.
What's your address to make sure?
So to clarify too, that he refers to as easements, town property run back through there for utilities. That's a town property.
Yeah, and it's 16.5 feet wide, and it's all sod.
Okay, so
Is there any grace given with that easement, like the property line still is inside that 16 feet?
No, yeah, the town property is separate from his property.
Okay. That's- Is there anyone else on that utility easement that is 2.5 to 0 feet from it in that area that you know of?
I am not aware. I did look for that.
what about that? Yeah,
Yeah,
if you look,
about
if you look, if you look at this picture here, you can kind of see that there appears to be a storage shed in the lot
Behind us.
Yeah,
behind,
close is that?
behind that.
I think it kind of looks like it's in the utility easement a little bit. I don't know how much. That thing is, well, it's leaks and all. That house is actually for sale. I mean, I'm presuming that shed will be torn down. I mean, the roof is pretty thin.
It's the same, what you're saying is it appears to be in the same proximity of distance from the easement. that yours is.
No, I think theirs is,
It's closer or on the east.
I think it crosses the line. Yeah,
Oh.
it appears to cross.
To answer your question, looking at Beacon, it appears multiple structures on at least a couple blocks
Are on that.
are on that, on the edge of that line.
So that's it.
It also looks like the actual utility lines
Yeah, they're on the,
are on
The
the
west
far,
side.
on the far,
The far side.
far end of
Yeah.
of the easement. In fact, it looks like they're probably trees that are subject to having to get whacked.
oh, they just did that.
Oh, yeah,
They just
they
did
did.
it, yeah,
Mhm.
like a month ago,
I
yeah.
mean, you can kind of tell, it looks like some of them are already hanging over.
Yeah.
Utility easement, what's the utility was here, like?
It's
Or what?
sewer and
Okay.
gas,
I was thinking that's what.
Yeah.
There's
but there's nothing exposed.
nothing exposed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But it's sewer and gas.
that was my main thing, making sure it was, I thought it was. Sorry?
So also at the last plan commission, or a month ago, not this last one, the one before, plan commission meeting, Bianchi's had one parcel with two lots and they combined those two, so it was one parcel.
Oh, so, yeah, we were combined.
So,
Yeah,
yeah, that is all one parcel,
it
one
was
lot now.
two.
To the north, you added. or something.
It was two lots and they combined it to one.
Yeah, one was north, one was south. And the garage was actually gonna be built on that, well, over it. And Steve told us, we had to combine it first, which makes sense.
I'm glad you did that too.
Yeah,
How long have you owned this house?
since 2018.
Did you buy it from Brian Kipp?
Mhm.
Mhm.
No.
John Long,
Yeah, long.
Okay.
Is there any issue from the town with the gate to have from the
I can't speak for the superintendent.
as a building commissioner?
So when it comes to utilities, that's more Bob Porter's area. As long as they have access down that area and nothing encroaches on it. That's what it's pretty much like an alley, but those town properties were, when it was laid out.
Right.
So utilities could be put in there and had enough width if it needed to be worked on, that the town could work on those.
And
Right.
I mean, they get through there when they need to right now.
Yeah.
But I mean, actually, your existing garage is only 2 inches right now.
2 feet.
2 feet, not 8
Yeah.
inches.
Yeah.
And now you want 2.5 feet because your
Yeah,
garage is actually gonna be 6 inches further away from you.
yeah, yeah. So, yeah,
And what the problem in that garage put there would be soon. First. You know, grandfather, there, yeah.
Yeah, the old one would be grandfather.
Yeah, I was saying, like old grandfather.
Okay, and the total length of the new garage, east to west, looks like it's 43 feet.
48.
48.
48 by
48, okay.
48 to 30.
Yeah,
But that includes the
That's hanging
patio.
yeah. The patio is on the west side of it.
but basically,
Yeah.
The patio is gonna be ground level.
yes,
Yeah,
yeah, it's all one story, it's all
Yeah.
one story. So,
I mean,
The
it's,
patio looks gonna be, you got your 3 cars.
The patio's not an issue for,
Yeah, right.
patio's not an issue for
Yeah,
the
no, right,
variance for zoning.
and on Main Street side,
that'll be the patio right there. These all face mill.
Is there a reason you can't move it further toward Main Street, away from the utility?
It's gonna be, if we move it farther south so that we can move it farther west towards Maine, we're ending up with a lot of cement and we were trying to preserve the green space. To make the driveway a lot longer.
Yeah, so you would have to move it south in order to move it
Right,
east.
right. Because there's only like 5 feet between the house and the garage.
And currently the back of the house, that's not a covered porch or anything? The east side of
Yeah, there is a covered porch. on it.
Yes.
this section here,
Yeah, that's
is that a
covered
covered
porch.
porch?
Yeah, where the indentation is, that's covered. Does that affect anything?
Did you include your overhangs in that?
Yep. And I mean, it's one-story garage.
Yep.
We, we want it to match the house. It's gonna be stick built. Same siding as the house, we care how it looks. We want it to be appealing to the neighborhood. And, right now, the parking is limited on Mill Street. I mean, it's a very narrow street. Our neighbors to the north of us, they park, and if we park on our side, only one car can go down the road. It's real tight.
Yeah.
This would alleviate that. I mean, we'd have a 2-car driveway.
If you got 3-car bay, you could actually park 3 cars in front of,
Right.
one in front of each bay. And it looks like it parks more in there behind those.
So if you moved it south to move it, are you concerned about the permeability of it? Like adding that much concrete, like encroaching on that 50%?
No, it won't.
I mean,
I would imagine that's.
It's just the green, we went the green
Yeah,
space.
I mean, I guess
Open the
we're
garden.
thinking,
Yeah.
shrubberies,
Yeah.
garden. I mean, we didn't want, pour concrete all over it.
And what size is the current garage? I know it's a 1-car, but
Yeah. I want to say it's 21 feet long.
okay.
50 by 20.
Yeah,
50 by 20, 40 by 20 or something like that.
yeah,
It's not,
It's
it's not
narrow.
big.
yeah.
It's not
big.
the garage.
No, it's not. I just was curious as to the length of it versus the width of the new one. So the width of the new one's 30. The length of the old one's probably whatever.
I think it was 2021. Yeah.
Would it be a problem moving everything? I mean, the patio's not forward yet, but they're on, like, front of the.
No,
Oh,
nothing's done yet.
Nothing's done.
I don't know if you had doors or anything in the house that this might mess up, whatever patio was poured on. I mean, this easement's not as bad as what the easement is behind my house. And I know I've got a shed back there pretty close. And it's for me,
Yeah.
for you trying to, so it's not a problem for you. Yeah, I don't feel right about, since you're tearing the other one down, that you should be pushing back away from the, as far as your setback being on me. That big. No. Okay. And since it's new construction, there's no reason why you can't do it. Other- Some problem that I'm not saying over here. But that's just my opinion.
Well, I mean, I see, you probably would have to move probably at least 10 feet south before you can move it east,
Right.
because you'd have to have some space between those, which if you move it, the garage east, you're gonna have to have some amount of space between the house and the footprint of the garage.
Right. But you got plenty of room to do that as well.
And the other thing that as you go towards Main Street, there's a hill. I mean, the house is raised, those are stairs off the back.
Yeah.
I mean, the floor there is probably 5 feet, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, okay, I got you.
There's actually sink. I don't know that.
Um,
So we can 5 foot grade top ground.
yeah, probably more.
Yeah, I'm gonna say you probably got more than that.
okay, so there's a grade that you have to deal with
Right.
and bringing in a bunch of dirt.
Right.
Yeah.
To move it east. And then you'd have some other issues with the grade if you move it 10 foot south. And then
Yeah, we'd have to bring on.
20 feet
Yeah.
east, you're gonna have to bring in a bunch of dirt for the western edge of the garage. Probably some part of the southern side of the garage.
I know what you're saying, but you know what I'm saying?
And
Would regrading that theoretically have,
It would be a hardship. Well,
I'm saying, would it also have a negative impact on utility?
exactly. I mean, I do. I mean, that's my concern as far as
I got water.
more toward allowing this. I mean, I see a reason that's what I was trying to find, is actually a reason why you would have it. Because if there was no reason, I really would be good about put deck close to your property.
But, I
Knowing the
mean,
contour of the yard and everything, I mean, I see that. Personally, on my side, I'm one person. Anybody else have any questions? There was nobody in the audience, nobody online.
everybody.
Nobody's in the room.
There is no one left online.
No other concerns? We can take it to finding fact.
yeah, I mean,
We don't need a motion.
You know, we're do the final fact to go from
We just do that.
each.
okay, all right.
What is confusing me, because we've never done. that
What did you just motion?
I'm not motion.
We don't need a motion. I'm just gonna start with, general welfare and go
Okay,
roll call to
so
each one.
I agree with general welfare, adjacent property, practical difficulty. And the topographical grade, increase of 5+ feet moving towards Main Street. Negative.
I agree on all 3.
No reason for doing that. Mr. Chris?
I agree on all 3. And the fact that there would have to be regrading done is the reason why.
And chair agrees with all 3 as well. And I agree because I think the topographical of your yard, you gotta put the foot.
Thank you.
Okay. And motion to put through the record.
Make a motion that we approve petition number 2025-B13.
Second.
Yeah. First and second, all in favor? That roll call.
Aye.
Aye.
And chair says aye. Any opposed? There's no one here. All right, we need a motion to put these on the record.
Make a motion that we put the 3 exhibits and the finding of facts to the record.
We have first and second. All in favor?
I,
Sure with that.
and the finding of facts and,
Three exhibits.
and the 3 what?
Exhibits.
And that passed unanimously, right?
Yes.
Who seconded it?
And then
Thank you for your patience.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you very much, yeah.
Last two were easy.
Or shorter.
Shorter.
Very good presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Okay, moving on to old business.
Put on here the I think that's what I was interested in. Regarding with the hardship.
Yeah. Old business or new business? Do we have any of those public bill information? Do you have anything?
No, thank you for asking. Just,
Members have any?
no, I do have one, just a reminder, we'll need to work as, Mr. Tankersley noted that our rules of procedure. So I'll bring that next month.
Okay,
Yeah, tonight it was totally
well,
different than what we were used to. I think kind of threw us off a little.
it did throw us off, but it may, I can tell.
Yeah, and I apologize. I'm just trying to make sure. I know that it's gonna get paid. I mean,
Oh,
it's
I
not mine.
I think that it's good to have standard operating procedures.
I'm glad you brought it up because we knew this was gonna be appealed as well,
Well,
but
well, what are the, and you can just put down, discuss attorney and discuss application. You could solve a lot of your
I'm
problems.
gonna let you talk.
Okay, you can solve a lot of your problems by requiring a specific application for variance. You guys are here deciphering what people want, having to ask repeated questions about where's this gonna be, and what's the setback gonna be. Some of them are giving you some aerial shots but I mean, you're the judge. You're sitting in the position, they need to present a case to you. They have the burden of proof, present it to me, give me your exhibits, show me what evidence you're relying on. And so you can take that, your findings of fact form, which is straight out of the Indiana statute that says, these are the things we gotta find, and put it in an application. So give us, what evidence are you relying on for us to vote in your favor? And then mark your exhibits and give us and identify all of your exhibits of what you're relying on. Well, they're just coming in here writing a letter this letter to the council, so I mean to you. They're writing you generic letters. They're not giving you, you're gonna have to like recreate it every time, so it's very difficult to do your job as a board when you aren't given a clear application and a clear case that's being presented by the applicant. You, the applicant, have the burden to convince us. So you need to give us all the information you're counting on. And then you can just say, okay, I agree with the points 1, 2, and 3 of the applicant said on here. I agree with those terms, or I disagree. And here's why I disagree. Instead, you're guys having to like pull out reasons out of thin air and like write them down. It's almost impossible. So you really need to spend time on an application, and the rules are important too. But I think the application, a standard application, you want a variance, you fill this out, and you got to have all the details. And I want to know whatever questions you guys go ahead and you can discuss this at the next meeting. Like, I want to know how far back all the setbacks are going to be if we grant your variance. How much of an encroachment are you looking to add? What are have you contacted the neighbors? Did they, have they weighed in on it? I mean, things like that. I don't know what all issues you want to, what kind of questions you normally ask.
In this thing that he's been working on,
Uh-huh.
it does say proposals must include a site plan. We didn't have a site plan, and that's what I was kind of alluding
Right.
to.
Right. And you could have them in your rules. Your rules are good to have. But I'm telling you that most people are not going to come in and say, give me your rules and I'll read your rules. And then they're going to come, they're going to interpret your rules and come present you something. No, this is the form I want every single time. I want this form so I can just go through, here's your exhibits, and if they start bringing up stuff they didn't put in there, say, is that a new exhibit? Like, cause that's not listed here. What are you talking about? Cause for a judge to go back and look at your record, they don't know what you're even looking at or talking about. Well, this, then you're pointing here and you're talking, I'm not criticizing you. I'm saying, I've seen this over and over again with boards. The only way to rein it in is to have a set form, and then you can say, okay, and then you get better at it. You get better at saying, okay, you have to identify what exhibit are you talking about? So, and think about all the time, at some point, if these are challenged, the judge is going to be reading a transcript of what is said. And good luck figuring out what you guys what you were basing it on. I mean, we've articulated some of it, but it's going to be a mess.
Bits and pieces. And yeah.
Right. Just go, I don't know what they were relying on. Right.
Right. I
So,
see what you mean. So is that application out there that you're talking about? That
no
we
idea.
can use, or do we
No,
got,
I have no idea.
do we,
no idea.
we have to create it?
I'm guessing
We're gonna have to.
I'm sure
create
there's
it. So
got to be examples.
We're gonna have to have.
We don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Typically,
People are gonna
there's
have something out
typically
there.
you can find something.
Okay, so you can
As soon
probably
as I start looking, I'll
probably maybe
find
go
it.
online and maybe put bits and pieces
Yeah,
together
you
of different.
You find what you like,
And
you
then-
find a couple you like,
And tweak it.
take the parts you like, then add your own. Well, here's something I always want to know. I always want to know exactly what the setbacks are going to be. If you want an elevation, some sort of an idea what the elevation is here, but that became an issue that you weren't really sure of until I want photographs of the color photographs of the property from all four sides. I mean, I think those seems like basic things you would need to make a decision.
But even when you look at that, we were talking about the pervious and impervious.
Mhm.
What would that actually do to the property? And would you look at just where the house is? Would you try and include that strip to the lake as considering for pervious and impervious? Because it's what comes off the house with the drainage from that house, but the variance and stuff even affect neighbors. I didn't really think of that until later. But when you're talking about economic gain, you still have previous variances added with no structure. That automatically makes the lot.
So to your point, we need
Structure,
better structure.
We need a structure.
Just an outsider coming in here and for the first time really sitting in one of your contested hearings is watching, the first people they did a much more thorough job, but still it was their idea of what they wanted you to hear.
Exactly.
It's not your idea of what I need to hear.
It's always,
I want to know these things.
Yeah.
And you know that going in, so.
and it's always a hardship.
Well, and we did ask that.
Yeah. But I mean, you were talking about as far as our procedures, stuff like that,
Right.
I think it ought to be a requirement on an application that a variance be, it will provide that structure that's gonna go on there.
Yeah, there you
We have
go.
been-
So I need to know exactly
It
what,
needs to be on that
and then it
application.
has to meet certain.
Application.
Let me put something together for y'all
Yeah,
and it'll give a point to
Yeah.
start
But I do
discussion.
believe that, because if we gave those variances where they wanted, if they'd asked for
So
whatever, you could build a two-story house.
You could identify, we expect a blueprint that has all of these things in it. It has
Exactly.
elevation, it has,
Pervious, impervious,
all of those things.
all those.
And so it's gonna require people to put more work into their application, but otherwise you're sitting here trying to figure out for them what they want.
They were very vague about this house because they had this drawing. We've seen this drawing before, but they wouldn't commit 100% to say that's what we're gonna build.
Yeah, I didn't understand that. I think
Yeah, we
they
just
were
make it-
hedging their bet like, well, we'd like to build a bigger one, but we'll build this one if you let us. But
Yeah.
if you really let us, we'll go 15.
Get all these setbacks, we'll do
Why
whatever.
would you set all them setbacks up when you don't know what you want to put? unless you're trying to make sure you've got enough leeway for whatever you want.
Well, they're either gonna appeal with it or they're gonna probably reapply and join the Burns dispute.
But you figure if you,
Well, our ordinance is if you have to wait a year, if you,
Yeah.
if you,
yeah,
are, get an unfavorable ruling.
I mean, they can take it to court for it, but
Is that per parcel or per?
Unified for what they.
That's for the parcel.
So far, I mean, they had one.
It locks it up for a year.
Here that talked to us for an hour. Yeah. Okay, they put how much time into that? They had another attorney that. Right here, that talked to us for an hour.
So we two attorneys argue with each other, you know.
Yeah, well, right.
We just decided if you're gonna argue about that.
So point well taken to get
Yeah, all right, we'll figure it out.
structure.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
All right, good.
They spent that amount of money and they say they've got some plans
Yeah,
that they couldn't.
they had, yeah.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't get too much into that more on the record. Maybe
As
it's-
far as this goes, and we'll
Well,
plan it, the next meeting will be at 6:30 PM Thursday, July 17th, 2025, for the minute's sake. And other than that, we have adjourned, and we can adjourn and still have a discussion for that. Yeah.
Okay, so who motioned?
I make a motion to adjourn.
I'll say.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Aye.